Hello, everyone. Hope you're well this afternoon. Welcome to our RegTech Edge No Borders event on employment compliance. In the spirit of reconciliation, the RegTech Association acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So again, welcome. Since 2020, we've had over 19,000 people from more than 85 countries attend our programs. It's a shorter event today as we have 3 RegTechs presenting, but we have had registrations from 17 countries and there have been 74 registrations, 26 regulated institutions, 4 government regulators, 2 investment and 29 RegTechs. So wherever you're joining us from today, thank you. And don't forget, those who have registered will also receive a link to the recording after the event. Before we jump into the housekeeping of the day, I just wanted to give you an update on our Industry Perspectives report for 2023. This annual data collection is critical to the association as it helps us depict trends and identify opportunities and pain points. It also enables us to compare the current environment from the previous year to see how the ecosystem is performing in a range of significant areas, including, most importantly, the acceleration of the adoption of RegTech. I wanted to thank everyone that has contributed to the survey, and we look forward to presenting you with our analysis. We are currently working with the London EY team on this, and the initial data is showing some really interesting things. So keep an eye out for that event when we do something on that later this year. And now on to housekeeping. As I've already mentioned, today will be recorded and each registered delegate will receive the link. Cameras and mics off, please, unless you're presenting. All questions in the chat that you might have for our presenters. And there will be some polls coming up now and then that we would appreciate you answer. And our presenters will be presenting for 5 minutes each. At the 4-minute 30-second mark, they will see my face come on as a visual reminder that they have 30 seconds to go. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Ross Riddlestone, who will provide us with a quick overview on the current landscape. Ross is a director of Anson McCabe, a specialist search firm focusing on strategic leadership hiring and specialist project resourcing in Australia and Singapore. Beyond delivery, Ross and his team advise on recruitment strategy, resource management from a diversity, hiring through to EVP. Ross has 20 years experience in UK, Europe and Australia. Over to you, Ross.
Thanks, Alison. Today we have speakers from Veremark, vSure and Yellow Canary who will focus on hiring outcomes, candidate experience and compliance. As an introduction to this, I'll run through a brief macro view of the Australian employment market and an overview of the legislative changes coming from Fair Work, and then dig a little deeper, plus point out some upcoming challenges. To start with, we have seen 2 things which have had an impact to employment here in Australia. Firstly, a near record-breaking uptick in migration. In the year to August, over 400,000 overseas migrants and returnees moved to Australia, double compared to last year. This has meant more workers for jobs, but also more pressure on employer compliance with regard to onboarding and visa checks. Conversely, as we're all well aware, there's been significant pressure from interest rate hikes as well as inflation. This has increased business costs and resulted in headwind for firms of all sizes. A consequence of this is that we are seeing an increase in performance management redundancies, which brings its own set of unique challenges to employers' compliance and beyond. Despite these challenges, it's not all bad news. Employment rates remain strong and a correction was always due after a sustained period of growth. We are already seeing some bullish signs for 2024 of our larger employers. Now to employment compliance. Since the last meeting in May, there have been a number of changes, so it's not an easy task to cover up any of this in depth. So in brief, can we have the next slide, please? June 2023, we saw changes to flexible work arrangements, extended unpaid parental leave, changes to enterprise agreement making and bargaining. July was national minimum wage increase to 23.23 an hour, superannuation increased to 11%, an increased monetary cap for small claims to recover unpaid entitlement. On the 1st of August, we saw paid family and domestic violence leave affecting small and large businesses. Towards the end of the year, we're going to see limits to fixed term contract arrangements, and at the end of the year, changes to the way employees are able to authorize salary deductions from their employer. These changes will need consideration and internal uplift, but there are two issues that I wanted to cover off in a little more detail. Next slide, please. First, the change to flexible working arrangements. This has slightly broadened the circumstances to allow flexible work, which really focuses on areas such as pregnancy and domestic abuse. Most importantly for employers, though, it's the amendment that defines a framework for employers' obligations when responding to a request, including the requirement to discuss the proposed changes, genuinely try to reach an agreement before refusing that request, and also provide detailed reasons for refusal. If this process is not followed, then it can be escalated up to Fair Work. Now, a lot of employers will have seen the headlines and think that this could be a barrier to getting people back into the office. It's important to note that the circumstances where an employee may request flexible working arrangements under the NES remain limited. In short, this is not a ticket to everyone working from home in future. The changes do not address key issues around working back in the office and will not give employers who are reluctant to return to the office greater rights to continue working from home, unless, of course, they're covered by one of the specific categories. The key to dealing with these requirements, though, is to make sure the requests are dealt with fairly and in accordance with the legislation. The second issue I wanted to highlight is the change to fixed-term contracts. This means that going forward, fixed-term contracts will be limited to 2 consecutive contracts or 2 years, whichever is shorter. The reason I mention this is that anecdotally, we're seeing far more scrutiny on contract structures, especially for contract renewals from the ATO. Furthermore, there's been a lot more recent testing on sham contract arrangements. Next slide, please. I think this is going to be one of the strong, I think we're on the final slide now. I think I'm mixed up in my slides. Sorry, guys. So I think as we look forward, that's going to be a strong theme to the next cycle. I think there's going to be more crackdowns on contractors in persistent roles, and there could be changes to this with Fair Work legislation's proposals on same job, same pay with respect to labour hire agreements. This is also borne out by last year's ban on pay secrecy clauses in contracts and a drive towards transparency of pay structures. So there's a lot of changes happening affecting companies large and small. Compliance for these is one thing, but there will be actions that can be taken to minimise risk and allow agility for the upcoming shifting landscape. So that's it from me. I'll provide a written summary of the changes which may be of use, but for now, onto our subject matter experts who will share more insight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ross. That's great. I'd meant to ask you before when I said that saw that you guys also have a presence in Singapore. Not sure if you'll be at Singapore FinTech Festival, but myself and Deb will be there. So hopefully anyone on the line who's going to be there, make sure you reach out to us. Our first presenter is Veremark. Over to you.
Thanks, Alison. Hi, everyone. My name's Mark Salamai. I'm the sales director for Veremark here in Australia, and I'm here to, tell you all about how Veremark can help you do the employment compliance piece a bit easier. Next slide, please. Very quickly, Veremark is to sum up who we are, Veremark is a global background and reference checking platform with an in-person presence in all major markets, North America, EMEA, all through Southeast Asia, India, Australia, and New Zealand. Next slide, please. We offer and deliver checks, over 40 different types of employment diligence checks in over 180 countries, everything from global sanctions, financial regulatory checks, bankruptcy checks to more cutting edge social media checks and bread and butter work rights checks as well. Really flexible to the needs of various degree of organizations around the world. Next slide, please. But I'm here to talk specifically about the importance of rescreening candidates in the few minutes that I have. It is essential for best practice, particularly for employees working in highly sensitive or protected roles or protected and regulated industries. The reason for it is because it is not static. Circumstances can change. Just because you hired someone who had a clean criminal record and wasn't on any anti-money laundering lists when they started doesn't mean that they will be in the future. They can get up to no good. So it's important to keep on top of this. But it is a very manual and cumbersome process to manage when people need to do it. For example, Austrac recommends that you do it whenever an employee changes to a high-risk role, so for example, a money transfer or something like that, and annually on all staff inside the financial services sector as well. Once again, as somebody who's worked in recruitment in that sector, it is a difficult and manual process to do, open to human error. Next slide, please. Some of the risks associated with it can be seen there. Massive fines. Austrac, and as I'm sure many people here know, for in particular, has I suppose a bit of a policy of we assume you'll do the right thing, not apologizing if you don't. So it is a case of getting it right the first time and getting it right every time after that. Next slide, please. So Veremark's solution to this is to automate that check process for you at the check level. So when you hire someone, you might have them come in and do a whole range of checks, such as employment history and academic checks that you don't need to check again. That's static, that's fine. Don't touch it again. But a criminal history check, a financial regulatory check, a global sanctions check will need to be done on a 12-month basis, for example, or as you can see here, on a custom basis set by your organization or even your team. And you can have that check rescreen as required to your needs, not the whole package. And the system is intelligent as well. So it actually takes data from the previous check that was done to allow the candidate a much, much improved candidate experience moving forward. It's a bit more like how people file their tax returns in Australia. We simply go in, a lot of people will go in, check that the information from the previous data entry is still up to date, enter any new information that may be required, and then accept it. So you're not asking your employees to type War and Peace into a keyboard, keeping on top of to, I guess, provide information to keep doing the job that they already have. It's fully automated, and we had one client, I think it was in Malaysia, that did 4,000 rescreens in 1 week. So by automating this from the day, I guess, day zero, when a candidate starts, you allow them to get locked in with the compliance that may be needed moving forward. And you can also cancel it if a candidate leaves or if the compliance changes, needs change over time. Basically what it means is that you can ensure compliance on all of your candidates to the needs of your business from day zero with zero work needed after the fact. Next slide, please. And if you are interested in talking to me about this in any more detail, feel free to shoot me an email and we can talk about it from there. Thank you.
Mark, that was underneath the time. Well done, you. Thank you. That was great.
Thanks.
And now I'm going to introduce Matt from vSure.
Thanks, Alison. Next slide, please. The journey that is vSure began a bit over 11 years ago. This is our founder, a gentleman by the name of Mark Webster. When it comes to immigration in Australia, Mark is the former president of the Migration Institute of New South Wales. And Mark was actually consulted on a piece of legislation known as the Migration Amendment Reform of Employer Sanctions Act. This is the piece of legislation that transferred the obligation from the employee to the employer as far as taking reasonable steps at reasonable times to ensure that the employees are maintaining their work rights. Long story short, effectively, Mark provided feedback to the government that, hey, wouldn't it be good if the government alerted employers to changes in visa conditions or revocation of visas, etc. To which point they said, yeah, that's a great idea, Mark, but if you knew how bad our technology was, you'd know that's not really possible. So Mark set about building a solution to the problem that he saw with that legislation. And ever since, we've focused wholly and solely on work rights in Australia and grown to become the largest provider in the space by some margin. Next slide, please. Our clients include the who's who of the retail, hospitality agricultural sectors, some very large Australian and international brands. We also supply many of our competitors and many of the RegTech industry, as well as HR tech, with the underlying technology to be able to perform a visa check using a clean RESTful API. Next slide, please. We actually have 4 products in our offering. A web application as used by the large employers like Aldi and Kmart, etc., where they are able to integrate a right to work solution into their HR technologies. This isn't just about screening of new employees, but as per the last presentation, this is about the operational need to apply work rights restrictions. For example, student visas are restricted to 48 hours a fortnight during term. And so the ability to restrict their hours of work through an integrated rostering solution, vSure has that ability to integrate those work rights conditions into wherever within the HR stack the information is required. We are able to white label our solution out to other partners who on-sell our solution. We license out the API for checking of visas, no web interface required. Other software developers can ping our API and get a visa response. The other high growth area for us is the higher education market. There are a record number of foreign students in Australia at the moment. There are a number of use cases for higher education providers to have to do visa checks, and we've got a very simple solution for that. Next slide, please. From a work rights compliance perspective, the web application will streamline the process of onboarding a new staff member and performing a right to work check, be that an Australian citizen or non-citizen. In the case of a non-citizen, we'll then automate the ongoing monitoring of the visas. We'll provide a plain English definition of all the visa codes and conditions. And then ultimately, in the case of an action being taken by the Department of Home Affairs Border Force officers, or in this case can happen with Fair Work, an audit trail would be automated and provided so that reasonable steps and reasonable times condition can be met. Next slide, please. vSure Visa Checking API is a different product that we license out to the market, and that allows the obvious use case of other people to build work rights compliance into their systems through visa checking. It's also used by a number of KYC and KYE, your employee, to be able to validate a foreign passport. Everyone in Australia knows the DVS system for validating Australian documents. You can't validate a foreign passport, but you can if you perform a Vivo check, which is what our API opens up. So people are able to perform a validation of a foreign passport because a visa would be attached to that, and the visa conditions would be made available. There's a whole heap of other use cases that we're finding, insurance companies wanting to validate insurance policies and more. But yeah, the API is our fastest growing area, and we're working with more and more other RegTechs and FinTechs and HR tech companies in this space. Next slide, please. Why are we growing? We're growing at over 100% compound at the moment. One of the best things that happened to us was single touch payroll in Australia. You may be aware that your ATO data is sent to the ATO on a pay cycle basis. They then have something called the data sharing program that exists inside of Centrelink. Centrelink on-share that data to the Department of Home Affairs, and they are moving towards real-time audits of all work rights. So it's been a great thing for us because the compliance obligation has led to a lot of organisations now being aware that they're getting audited in real time and wanting to tighten up this area. Next slide, please. There's my contact details. I'm also on, obviously, this chat on Teams if anyone has any questions, but please reach out if they want to know more about vSure. Thanks, Alison.
Sorry, thanks so much, Matt. That was great. Thank you. And now on to Georgia from Yellow Canary. Over to you.
Thanks, Alison. My name's Georgia Phillips. I'm the Head of Growth and Chief of Staff here at Yellow Canary. I'm going to be taking you through who Yellow Canary is, why we exist, what our platform actually does, and then finally who we look after on that platform. Next slide, please. So Yellow Canary was founded in 2017 with a goal to challenge the traditional approach to workforce compliance. And we now enable many large Australian employers to achieve compliance confidence, and that's across employee payments, entitlements, and long service leave. So as you can see, we've done over 90 remediation reviews in the last 2 years. We've processed over $67 billion worth of payroll data, and we look after over 145,000 employees on our Always On Compliance platform, which is essentially a check of those employees' pay slips every month. Next slide, please. So as you can see, and as Ross alluded to earlier, industrial relations in Australia is extremely complicated. And the issue that a lot of our clients are facing is that their payroll systems are unable to keep up with this complexity. And that's regardless of having the best intentions, the best people, and the best payroll systems. But what we found that in the same way that you can't audit your financial statements as you go, you can't audit your payroll as you go either. So it's really important for employers to stop at a point in time and look backwards in order to keep up with this landscape. And that's really why Yellow Canary exists. It's to help employers with that periodic look back. Next slide, please. So our Always On Compliance tool, which we term AOC, performs automated monthly reviews of our clients' payroll data. So before we go live, we work with our client's legal counsel to confirm pay rules and interpretation principles. And then on a monthly basis, we take in payroll, T&A data, roster, employee master file data, and we compare what was paid to what should have been paid. Once that's done, employers can go into the system. They can see if there's been any variances during the month and if they need to top up any employees. And they can go into the portal and there's dashboards there, but that provide a really great insight for people at that executive level that are looking for an overview of their compliance position and how they're generally tracking. But then there's the variance section, which is really the heart of the platform. And that has all the detail. And it's really helpful for payroll folk who are wanting to understand drivers and see more of the nitty gritty into their data. And what we've also found is a lot of payroll people, they might get a call from an employee saying, why have I been paid an extra $30 this month? They can log in, put the employee ID in and see exactly why they were paid that amount and how it was calculated, rather than having to dig through spreadsheets and multiple systems. Next slide, please. So one of our clients is a large ASX listed retailer. And they'd done a historical remediation review, but they were searching for a solution in the market that would help them with ongoing compliance. They were finding that their payroll systems and their T&A systems couldn't keep up with the complex interpretations that they had of the General Retail Industry Award. And I should note that we have about 30 clients who use GRIA, and we have over 100 different versions of that award on our platform. So it really shows that every business interprets rules differently, and our platform is really able to create your version of your award or your EA rather than a general set of rules that might not be fit for purpose. So back to this client, they now use Yellow Canary's AOC solution where they run monthly reviews to try and help bolster that compliance position. They make top-up payments before the next pay cycle, which results in no back pays to their employees. But I think the really important part is that they can now tell their employees that they're doing everything they can to make sure they're paying them correctly. So AOC is checking their pay slips every month, and that enables them to be really transparent with their employees and also their other key stakeholders. Next slide, please. So that's it from me. If anyone has any questions, please do get in touch. We love talking about payroll compliance here at YC. That's it from me. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Georgia. That was great. And yes, as I said at the beginning, it was short but sweet today. As we only had a few of our RegTechs that could present. We did have a number of RegTechs presenting, but unfortunately other things came up and so they had to change for another day. So thank you to Veremark, vSure and Yellow Canary, and of course thank you to Ross at Anson McCabe for his insightful information at the beginning as well. So just a couple of events that I want to talk to you about. On Monday, anyone that's here from overseas, in New York, we've got a face-to-face event. We're cutting off registrations tomorrow, so get in quick if you want to attend this face-to-face event. We are going to be at Singapore FinTech Festival, as I said earlier in the event, so please reach out if you would like to catch up with us. We'd love to see you there. On the 31st of October, so next week, we'll be hosting an online event on generative AI and the impacts on RegTech, and it will feature a panel with speakers from Castle Point Systems, Adobe, NAB, and Microsoft. And of course, we have got one more RegTech Edge No Borders for the year, and that is on 30th of November, and is the risk area addressed is cyber and information security risk. Thank you again for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we will see you at our next event. Thank you.